Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on Porch Time today. Yes, finally the cool weather has made it to the Deep South. We are in the midst of some of our coldest weather this season so far. Now it's been in the 40s, but we're dropping down to freezing now. So that's going to get rid of a lot of the tender vegetation here. And that's what today's video is really about. It's called the cold, hard truth. Now, when we talk about the cold, hard truth, what I'm going to be talking about is the grand solar minimum and how it's affecting us here in the Deep South. And as a world and as a nation, really. There's a lot of information out there about this, guys. I mean, some of it's probably not that accurate. Some of it's very accurate. Some of it's just tinfoil hat theory stuff, I believe. The bottom line is this. This is nothing new. History repeats itself. And that's what we have to understand with this. The thing about it is how much of this is actually truth, how much of it's actually not the truth, what can we believe and what can we not believe. Well, I'm going to tell you what I have found out and what I believe at this point. Are we going into a solar minimum? Yes, I do believe that. All evidence, all data, everything that I've been able to find, no matter if it's from NASA or whatever, .gov, or whatever the government's looking at, things like that. Different scientists that are third-party people, different things like that. I'm believing that we are going into a solar minimum. I do believe that we're going into what's called cycles of the sun. The sun goes in 11-year cycles. I do believe we're going back into one of those, but I also believe that we're headed into something that we haven't seen in probably a good 400 years plus. I actually believe, if they're 100% accurate, that we could possibly be going back into the type of weather they had back in the 14th century and earlier. Now, there's an individual out there by Valentine, I don't even know how to say the last name, something, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but Zarkov or Zarkovov or however you want to say it. This person has put out some data that's very interesting, and you can watch. I watched the thing this morning on Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Diamond there was talking about this particular person also. I had found it without the use of him, but I found him through this person, and was watching him. And guys, there's a lot of information there that's that I do believe is accurate. But now, let me say this. The reason I say that a lot of this is cycles is because we're just simply right now getting back into a pattern that I experienced in the late 70s in my life. It's still not as cold as it was in the early to late 60s here. Because you have to understand, when I was just a small kid, my daddy would take me squirrel hunting on October the 1st. Squirrel season always opened here October 1st. And when he would take me, there would always be a frost that morning. Now, we haven't had a frost on October the 1st. I don't even know that. I mean, I can't remember the last year. I know this, October the 16th, 1977, I had a massive car accident that y'all have watched my channel, you've heard me talk about, that almost took my life. That morning, there was ice on the ground. Is the reason I lost control of the vehicle once it got off the road, is because everything was iced over. And just frosted and frozen everywhere. So that was October the 17th, 1977 on, so we haven't had that. I can't remember the last year that it got that cold that early. So guys, even with the cold weather we're experiencing, excuse me, right now, on November, in November, we still have not reverted back to that cold that early. So I know that we still have a ways to go just to get back to where I was when I was a kid. Now my daddy frequently talks about how cold it was when he was a small child during the Great Depression era. Now I don't know if we'll go beyond that amount of coldness. I don't know. I know here, Wanda and I talk about it quite frequently. We used to have the state fairs would come through here, or county fair, let me say that. County fairs would come through here about mid-September to late September, and we would always have to wear sweaters and jackets. Now, we haven't had that in, like I said, I don't know how many years it's been since it was like that. And I think the fact of the matter is, my generation remembers a lot of the colder weather. A lot of the younger generation that's becoming so caught up in this coldness thing and freaking out about it is people that were the millennial age that grew up and they haven't actually seen this colder weather this early. Now, I do believe there are a lot of variables in this. Now, I don't think it's a panic mode just yet. I do know that with the data that's coming out, because now we have, let me say this, now we have supercomputers that you can plug this data into that's gathered through satellites and different things, and these supercomputers are, I mean, they're beyond imagination as far as what they can come up with and the accuracy of things that they can come up with. It's, I mean, guys, let's just face it, it's AI, it is what it is. It's artificial intelligence that's beyond man's comprehension. It can predict things based on just weather patterns and stuff. And it's extremely accurate, a lot of it. But the thing about it is this serious, or should I take it serious? What does it mean for me? What should I do? How is it going to affect me? Could it be life-threatening? I mean, there's lots of issues there and lots of ways that we could look at this thing. And is it something I think we should pay attention to? Yes. Simply because we're looking at a nation that's now not prepared for anything. And for it to turn massive cold like they're talking about, with the kind of people we have in the country today that don't know anything about raising their own food, all they know is to go to a supermarket, it's going to be extremely devastating for those people. I'm getting a lot of data and research in right now from different people in different locations that's showing me that probably in the near future we're going to start seeing a mass migration of people from the north to the south just so they can have food to eat. Now I know that sounds a little bit far-fetched right now, but guys, stop and think about it. In the year of 1815 and 1816, this happened because that was a year without a summer. It never did warm up north, and they're saying we're going to go back to that. And those people migrated. They were starving to death. They got out of the northern states, of the New England states. A lot of them migrated south. A lot of them stayed. A lot of people, especially in Europe, died from hunger and different things because there was no food. And that was a year that we had the volcano that erupted, and that stuff got into the ash got into the upper atmosphere, and it actually just stayed too cold. And there's nothing to say that that cannot happen again. As a matter of fact, they're predicting that, you know, through Ohio, down through Illinois, Indiana, on across through Kansas, Missouri, places like that, that here in the next few years it's going to get so cold that, you know, basically you can't raise anything up there. the days will just be too short of warm weather to actually be able to grow any kind of corn crops or soybeans or anything like that that they normally are used to raising. Now, is this 100% accurate, guys? I don't know that. They're calling it the mini ice age just simply because we're going back. Let me say this, it's because of things that they're seeing in the sun and the magnetic fields around the earth, how the sun is actually going to sleep. And one thing I looked at was extremely disturbing because and I can't back it up because I'm not a scientist. All I know is it's just the data that's out there, is that between 2020 and 2021, we're going to see a massive plunge in the temperatures. And when that happens, they're talking about famine could take place, especially by 2030. And that really concerns me as an individual because you know, if I live, I'll be extremely old then, and I won't be able to probably get out and do much if I make it. And for it to be going into plunging that deep into the cold, frigid temperatures beyond what we've seen here since the 1400s, you know, I have to make provisions now for that. If I'm going to go ahead and do it regardless to the best of my ability. That's why I tell people, you need to get some sort of a heating system in. You need to get that you can maintain, something that's not electric, something that's not gas, because if these things freeze over like they're talking about, there's not going to be getting any of this stuff. The thing that I was talking about that was so disturbing to me was they're talking about that, I gotta put my hands in my jacket here, guys. It's actually pretty chilly out here. They're talking about as this sun goes to sleep, that the sun periodically, now this was news to me, but the sun periodically resets itself basically. It goes to sleep to a point that when it resets itself, it throws off these massive solar flares. And with all the artificial intelligence and the technology we have today, the thing that they're saying is going to make it so bad is that it's actually going to fry everything. We're going to have these coronal mass ejections that's going to fry all these electronic devices that everybody has, and that it could possibly throw us back into what they call the Stone Age, which would be our forefathers' age. I mean, just simply the fact where there was no electricity. I mean, I don't know why they call it the Stone Age, but just to where there's not all the technology, and it's not going to be man-caused. It's just simply the earth and the sun and the cycles that everything goes through resetting itself. And the reason they're saying that back when this actually happened, I forget how many years ago I've looked at so much stuff I don't even remember the accurate years anymore, but the reason it wasn't so bad back then is because there were no electronic devices, and most people did not even know that anything happened. Some of the stuff that I'm finding out that's a little bit disturbing to me for future generations and for myself, my kids and stuff, is that when the sun starts doing these things and the magnetic field around the earth begins to break down and the atmosphere changes around the earth, you start seeing massive heart issues. It starts fooling with the rhythms of the heart. It starts fooling with the mind. They're saying that because of the radiation that the sun is going to allow, that's going to be getting in here to the earth, that it actually fools with people's ability to think straightly, think clearly. It creates a mad race of people. And if you go back in history and you look, there are periods in history where there were heart issues. There were people who were classified as being crazy people. There was a crazy, people were said to be mad and all that, and it was nothing more than the sun going to sleep, according to the information I'm finding out, and just simply the human body being affected by the magnetic field around the Earth being dropped and allowing these radiation waves in here that's doing this to people and things. And Wanda and I talked about this, and we can remember some things we've read in history about different generations and how they were said to be crazy and all that stuff. And, you know, it's just amazing to me that that this is such a big issue now. I never thought I'd see anything like this in my lifetime. You know, when I was a kid and it was this cold, we didn't think anything about it. I mean, you know, we had a fireplace in the house, and we had my mom and dad had a gas heater. We didn't use the gas hardly ever because it was just so expensive, but most of my childhood was with a fireplace. My dad was in the timber industry, so it was nothing for us to keep firewood. And I look back today, guys, and I see how much things has changed. Now, when I was growing up, my daddy would have never dreamed of burning dry wood in a fireplace. He would have laughed at you because he'd have said, dry wood, it just burns up. It's really hot, but then it doesn't last. My dad always waited, and he cut green wood to go in the fireplace. And I stop and I think back, we never had a chimney fire. Our house was always warm, and you put wood on the fire, and buddy, when it got to burning, that baby was hot. And I'm telling you, it put some heat out, because Daddy had to heat the whole house with the fireplace. And my daddy used big old fat pine lighter knots. I mean, when he built a fire, he built a fire. As a matter of fact, if they wasn't a pine knot, my dad always kept a gallon jug of diesel fuel sitting beside the fireplace. Him being in the timber industry and logging and pulpwood and stuff like that, we had diesel or kerosene, and he'd take that stuff and pour it all over them logs and light it up, and he'd have a roaring fire going in there. And they called it back then, they called it a backup fire. Now, things back then was quite different than they are now, because there was one source of heat in the house usually. That was the fireplace. Wanda and I talked about this. None of our bedrooms when we grew up as kids was ever heated. They were just rooms. There were no ductwork or gas heaters or anything like that brought into a bedroom. Lots of times, Mama, Wanda and I both talked about this. Our mothers would go put a heater in the bathroom, a little electric heater, and heat the bathroom up so we could all run in there and take a bath. And when you got out of the bathtub, you ran and got in front of the fireplace until you warmed up. It was just, guys, it was just the way it was. We live in a different world than we live in today. We were sitting and talking this, about some of the changes. The beds that we slept on. They had steel box springs under them. They were actually steel coil springs that a mattress laid on top of. And if you was lucky to have one of them, now most of the beds I slept in was kind of like if you've seen the old army cot beds, they were just a thick 4 or 5 inch thick mattress with literal steel springs around the frame underneath it, and it just sat on it, and that was those springs, that was your box spring, I guess you won't call it that. None of this sleep matter stuff like we have today where you can set the numbers on it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just different. As a matter of fact, when an old box spring wore out, you saved it on the farm and you pulled it around behind the tractor in the field after you disced it, and it helped bust up the clods in the dirt and level the ground out. It's kind of like what we call section hair. Guys, I'm really worried for the generations that's coming. And what we're going to be facing, because the bottom line is this: there's so many people out here that don't even know how to make it through these type of winters that we're going to be facing. I've told y'all many times, you went back and listened to my stories about how I had newspapers on the walls in my bedroom to keep the wind from coming through when I was a small child. We could see through the cracks in the floor. We had a wood heater in one room, and Mama would hang quilts across the doorways to keep that one room warm when I was a small kid. And we slept in that one room when it was so cold we couldn't sleep in our bedrooms. But if it was going to be like, say, 35 or 40, well, Mama just piled the quilts on you on your bed, and that's where you slept, in an unheated room. And Daddy would build a fire. The next morning you would get up and you'd run and get in front of the fire to get warmed up enough you could eat breakfast and get off to school. And guys, so much has changed. So most of us today are so used to just walking in there, pushing a switch, and the whole house is heated. We got, you know, got electric heating throughout the house, and we got furnaces of all kinds that heats our homes to a comfortable temperature, and they're all computer controlled now. And I don't know what'll become of this if I don't know what'll become of people, because they have no way to stay warm if something like this should happen and the grid goes down. I really do have a pity on the people who live in the northern climates, because I think you're going to start really seeing some very frigid cold temperatures coming in here in the next few years. And I'm really urging you, let me say this, I'm urging you to try to get some sort of a heat source in for the future if you're going to stay in those kind of areas, and to really get you some food sources in, get some stuff canned, stuff like that. And that's why I call this the cold, because it's going to get cold, hard. It's going to be hard, because a lot of people don't know how to live through this stuff. And the truth is, it's just going to be tough. And if you don't know how to live through it, you'll freeze to death. I mean, you go back into the year of 1815, year of 1816, lots of people just died. If you go do the data on it and look, there was hundreds of thousands of people just died because they couldn't get warm. They had no food. They died from starvation, from famine, and first one thing or other. The ones who lived are the ones who migrated, or either had made preparations for it. You know, people of my generation going into this will probably fare pretty well, because a lot of us were raised knowing how to live through this and knowing how to survive through it. But the problem today is there's so many people that don't have any land of their own to go get wood. They don't have land to raise anything on. They don't have land for animals. They don't have land to hunt on for something to eat. And that's where the tough part's going to come in at. And that's just the cold, hard truth behind all this, is that it might not be the life that we've expected it to be. And it's not that it's man-made. Guys, all this stuff about global warming and carbon credits, and, you know, that's all man-made hogwash, if you want to use that word. It's not true. The earth goes through cycles. The sun goes through cycles. That's what we're going through now. We're going into a grand solar minimum, I do believe. Now, whether it's a Maunder minimum, an Eddy minimum, I'm not 100% sure about any of these different types of minimums. All I know is I'm beginning to see changes that I saw in my younger years, and it's still not as cold as it was when I was a small child. So that tells me we've still got a ways to go before we even get to that point. But even at that point, guys, people lived and they survived in the early 60s, in the late 50s, and they did just fine because they knew how to. The problem is, I'm afraid the generations we have today are not set up for it. Everything, all the houses that's built today are 100% electric. They have no alternative heat. And even if they did have an alternative heat source, they don't own any land, most people. They don't own any way to go gather any kind of wood or anything like that to stay warm. So it's just sad that the situation we've got ourselves in, to everybody living in subdivisions and apartments and stuff like this. And I know there are people who, that's the best you can do. I've lived in town once in my life, and I did it for about 6 months, and went stark raving crazy, about ready to kill people, and I had to get out, you know, and I went back to the country because I didn't see how people could do it. It's not for me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's just not for me. And My heart goes out to people knowing what we may be facing. And that's why I tell you, please figure out some way of surviving through this cold weather. Now, it's not necessarily, let me say this, it's not necessarily going to be just cold weather. Guys, these solar minimums that they're talking about is not necessarily about just being so cold. It's about weather. It's all about the weather. I guess I should have said that to start with. It's extreme weather changes. I mean, violent weather, hot weather, beyond what you normally would experience. Cold weather that plunges way below where it normally should. And everything is about extremes in the weather. If it starts getting dry, then it's massive droughts and famine. If it starts raining, then it's massive flooding. You know, everything's going underwater. People's places, everything's lost. It's just about extremes. The jet streams will be changing. That's the biggest issue that they're seeing. We've got the El Niños and the La Niños in the Pacific Ocean. Those determine the weather of the United States and whether or not it's cold further south, whether or not the cold stays to the north. And they're saying now that this year, because of a weak La Niño or El Niño, that the cold fronts are going to just plunge out of Canada and go slam out into the Gulf of Mexico and all the way down to Cuba, down through there in Mexico, and just literally freeze the Deep South this year. And it's even going to get worse in the years to come, they're talking about. So guys, you know, this porch time is not about being a scare tactic. Please understand that. This is not about trying to scare anybody into anything. It's about having the knowledge to survive. Knowledge is power. If you're in one of these kind of places up in the northern climates and you don't want to be there through all this, and you want to be where it's somewhat warmer and where you might be able to grow something, then you may be one of those people who end up migrating toward the southern climates. Why do you think? There's sites out there, guys. Why do you think that all the rich people are buying up land in the southern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Texas? All these places are being bought up by wealthy people. Southern California, there's places, Africa. Why do you think China is buying up as much of southern Africa as they are? And guys, it's all about the food. We know that this is coming, and you know me, I've got to tie the Bible in with it. We know this is coming because in the book of Revelations it tells us plain and simple, there's going to come a day when it's going to take a whole day's worth of wages, whatever you can make that day, just to buy a meal. And if you do the research on that, it says the meal for one person. Not a family, but a person. And it tells you about the measure of wheat and the measure of barley and what it's going to cost and how much it'll be, about a quart. Guys, this is not me, this is the Bible. And if you believe the Bible, then you have to believe the fact that this stuff is coming. Now, how is it going to come about? Is it going to be because of the grand solar minimum? It's quite possible God could use that to bring about His will here upon the face of the earth. Now, I'm going to do all I can to prepare for it. I'm not planning on moving up north. I'm going to stay down south where I am. And if I lived up north, I would consider moving further south. Just because. Or I would try to find me a piece of property down here somewhere that just in case something happened, I'd have a place to go. Because let me tell you something. Lots and lots of people have told me that live up north. They've already bought places in Florida. They've bought places along southern Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. Lots of people have told me we've bought a weekend place there. Just so if something happens, we got somewhere to go. Guys, there's a site out there I can't really remember the name of it. I know that Jen, JM from the Nut House, knows. I think she knows where it's at. That gives you a list of the states in the United States that are the best states to move to survive what's coming. And it's kind of funny that Mississippi and southern Mississippi and southern Alabama are actually listed in these 210 states, and they're there for a reason, guys. The government's put this out there. For those of you who know Jen, you might message her or something like that, and maybe she can give you the information, because I don't have it right off the top of my head. I've got too much in my head now to be remembering that stuff. But I've seen it. But you know, guys, I did Porch Time today just simply because I've run across a lot of information. A lot of stuff's being sent to me right now. And I'm urging you. You need to get things in order. You can get them in order fast. Because the food all over the world right now is in a crisis mode. As far as I know, every continent on the face of the earth is experiencing some sort of food shortage. And it's not looking good. All the importing and stuff like that of certain foods. Some countries have said we're no longer going to export any food. Some countries are begging for imports right now of certain foods, and they can't get it. Lots of cattle are dying in lots of other countries because there's in drought. There's no food being raised. They can't feed the cows, so they're just having to slaughter them all off. Guys, these things will eventually affect each and every one of us. You're going to start seeing, probably within the next year, your food bill is going to go up about 12%. I'll tell you that. You're going to start seeing that. And the way it's being compensated for is they're putting food packages, they're making them smaller and still charging the same price, trying to trick you into thinking you're still getting what you were getting, and it's not the truth. So be very vigilant and pay attention. Like 5-pound bags of sugar are now 4-pound bags of sugar, but they cost the same amount of money. You know, we pay attention to stuff like that when we go to a grocery store. But anyway, guys, got coal sitting here. I've been sitting here long enough. We've had massive amounts of rain in the last day or so, so I got lots to do. We got one more cooking of sugarcane syrup to do, and this will all be over with for me. I'll be able to lay all this by and be able to relax from having to do the sugarcane anymore and start focusing on another project here at Deep South Homestead. So guys, I hope you take me serious. I hope that you will pay attention to the weather where you're at. Don't let it freak you out. Just do whatever you got to do to survive the coming cold, and do what's good for your family, and do what's best for you, whatever it requires. First of all, seek God's will in it to know what you need to do before you actually do anything. So thank y'all from Deep South Homestead.